Fox News' Greg Gutfeld has a comedy show. I want to show you what passes for right-wing comedy.
All right, here we are again, a brand new show and a brand new Greg. I'm as giddy as Kamala Harris explaining kids in cages. Or Woody Allen hearing about kids in cages. If you've been watching the GG show on Saturdays, welcome. If you love The Five and felt the need for more GG, that's awesome. If you ended up here because you thought your TV was the microwave oven, it's good to see you, Mr. President. Your pizza will be warm in 2 minutes, and Hunter, he brought the extra cheese. You all made a great choice. For proof, over at MSNBC, let's see what Brian Williams is up to right now.
Good evening, I'm Brian Williams, and I am on Mars. Yes, I jumped on a chopper and now I'm on Mars. I've been here for a year now. I built a castle here made of mastodon carcasses and marshmallows. This is where I invented all the COVID vaccines, as well as penicillin, the smartphone, and Fluffernutter.
What the fuck was that? Yikes! Oh, that's painful. Jesus Christ! I don't even get the what's with Hunter Biden with the cheese? What? Oh, geez. All right. Hey, but you know, at least he's not punching down, right? I mean, that's normally what conservative comedy is about. And he's not punching down. I mean, he's hitting corporations. That's something, right?
So screw you, MLB. Your stupid exhibition game is about as entertaining as a match of cornhole on ESPN at 3 a.m. in the morning. And screw Delta and screw Coke. In fact, screw all corporations. You stupid execs are cowards and bad golfers. You cheat on your taxes and you cheat on each other. I hope Dems raise the corporate tax to 99%, except on Fox, which should be tax exempt. Maybe I'm turning socialist, but after years of proclaiming corporations as engines of free markets, I realize they're locomotives run by meth heads who'll do anything to save their own hides. It's profit over people, no matter how many inclusion coordinators they hire. They'll turn a blind eye to China's slave labor, knowing that adding a diversity fun run to whatever History Month currently celebrated will stoke the woke in human resources.
Welcome to the resistance, Comrade Gutfeld. Oh my, who knew that woke corporations would drive people on the left, or to the left, on economic issues? That's seriously though, what? This is something, all right. Oof. All right. So let me give you some, oh boy, that was terrible. Jesus Christ. Okay, but let me give you some factual information to kind of rescue your brain from the garbage, right? Which is where you would want to put it after watching Greg Gutfeld. I'm just saying. The reason that the right wing, and you've noticed this is probably a theme that you've noticed, okay? Republicans are big mad at corporations now. And that's one of the craziest things that I've heard over my, week-long break. Is that, hey, wow, you know what? We're mad at Coca-Cola now. Okay, well, add it to the list of corporations that the right wing has been angry about. I mean, y'all remember people burning their sneakers, like over Nike, and before that, like destroying their Keurigs. I mean, the right wing has a history of boycotting corporations for doing like just about nothing, essentially. Like, we affirm that human rights are human rights. Oh, how dare you? Human rights. No, there are certain humans that shouldn't have human rights. I'm going to burn my Keurig. It's pretty ridiculous. Now, the big reason here, Coca-Cola, is that, they're mad at these corporations, Coca-Cola, because they're against the Georgia voting laws, the voter restrictions. Okay. Now, these companies still give massive amounts of donations to Republican politicians. Republican politicians, like, they get tons of money to basically funnel more money back to the rich and corporations, and as well as, deregulate them. And so that still happens. The only difference here is that these companies are suddenly like, oh, yeah, it turns out we like it when people can practice democracy. And again, that was enough for Greg Gutfeld to ironically punch up at a corporation, but for like the wrong reasons. And so it really is interesting. Now, the Georgia voter law, I've talked about this before. Here's what it does. Among other restrictions, it makes absentee voting hard, drastically cuts down on the number and accessibility of drop boxes during early voting, bars anyone who isn't an election worker from offering food and drinks to voters waiting in line. These people end up waiting in line sometimes for hours and hours at a time, 4 to 8 hours. Can you imagine voting, standing in line for 48 hours, 4 to 8 hours? I didn't say 48, 4 to 8 hours, and or 2 hours, whatever, and not being allowed to have a drink. I mean, that's ridiculous. What is this? And Gutfeld also, by the way, talked about in his monologue, he basically punched down at people who couldn't get an ID to vote. So now who doesn't get an ID to vote? Well, generally, like a driver's license is considered an ID, right? Or you have to get a special state ID, or you can own a gun. That also works. Now, people in the inner city, however, generally in poorer urban areas, minorities, poorer white people who live in those areas as well, generally tend to take public transportation, so they don't need a driver's license or any kind of special ID. And that special ID, of course, is a pain in the ass to get. Of course you can get it, but you have to invest time. You have to go down. You have to find time off work. Maybe you're off your 2 or 3 jobs to try to go and get that ID. So basically, it's a gigantic pain in the ass that fundamentally you shouldn't have to go through. And that's the argument that I make against having the requirement for voter ID. Why should we have to jump through all those hoops, especially when it's shown that voter fraud is incredibly rare? We shouldn't. It's just what it is it's just a roadblock that is put in the way intentionally to get people, to discourage them from voting, because it turns out when less people vote, Republicans tend to win. And that's the thing. Okay. Weird how that turns out. Now, what's interesting here is that Coca-Cola and these companies don't really have that big of a dog in the fight. I mean, again, sure, if Republicans win, they get tax cuts and deregulation. That's good for them. It's good for their executives. But then why would they side openly with socially liberal people on these issues? Because we won the culture war. It's true. We have won the culture war. Conservatives are now the counterculture. And boy, they've dove right into it. They are the counterculture of disaffected white conservatives and religious people. That's who this appeals to, by the way. If you're watching Gutfeld, you're usually somebody who's a disaffected white person. You are mad that minorities get to vote. You are mad, right, that there are people out there that don't like it that you're against trans rights or gay rights, things like that, or that you're in favor of people making their own bodily decisions about their body. Okay, there's that. Okay, that's who finds this funny. And yes, they are punching up in this case, but that's because they're no longer considered in the mainstream. This is why they rail against cancel culture, despite the fact that they, of course, were the ones that perfected cancel culture back when they were in the prevailing mainstream. Remember, it used to be the fact that conservatives were dominant in the culture. And so what happens is that I've noticed a pattern. Society tends to swing between, being socially conservative and being socially liberal. Okay. You have your, conservative mainstream ideology versus your progressive ideology, okay? And so, interestingly enough, this has nothing to do with the economics. Back in 1960, when you had basically social conservatives that were running the show, the liberals were the counterculture, the anti-war movement was the counterculture, you actually had high tax rates on corporations, the wealthy, higher wages for workers, less income inequality, but only for white people, by the way. And so this is what they say when they want to make America great again. They want to bring it back to that point where essentially white people were doing really well and women stayed in the kitchen. I mean, that's really it. But mainly, this is not about economics. It never has been. Okay, this is about social issues. It's about their place in society, and their place is, for them, they think that they belong on top. And the biggest irony of all, by the way, is that those same corporations they're railing against, they're the ones that are on the top. But again, the focus here is on so-called woke corporations. And they're doing this not because they're afraid of the activists on Twitter, but because they want to appeal to more people. Simply put, it's a business decision. It's not that they're scared of being called out on Twitter. It's just generally they're just like, yeah, I want to appeal to more people. I want to make more sales. That's really it. Racism, misogyny, homophobia, they're not, and transphobia, they're not really appealing to the general public. Most people don't give a shit if a man wants to marry another man, and generally agree that police officers should not kneel on the necks of black men who are subdued for 9 minutes to kill them. All right? And they also believe that everybody should be allowed to vote. But again, the new conservative counterculture looks a lot like the old one. Counter against any significant social progress to ensure that humans, are, not treated like humans. Because they don't care. If it's not them, if it's not in their family, if it's not in their tribe, if it's not in their people that look like them, they don't care about them. Overall, though, the fact that Gutfeld misses the point, the entire point of comedy, which is to be funny while also punching up, is why the right wing will always fail at comedy. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.